And welcome everybody to our Zoom Rotary meeting. And I was very remiss at our last meeting, the last two Zoom meetings that we've had, that I did not mention that March is Women's History Month. And it's something that I should have done while we were talking about a lot of the historical things that were going on. So that's something that I wanted to mention to everybody. I also want to bring up that we are going to do a poll at the end of the meeting. So stick around. It will be an instantaneous poll talking about how much we want to spend for lunch. And Mary will conduct all of that, and I will finish up the day with just a couple of little comments. Another thing that I did want to mention, though, that it's within the last week, and we will hear much more about this and have a memorial service for Ralph Monroe, who passed away, and also Frank Chop, two very important people that for the state of Washington, one a Republican, one a Democrat, both very, very concerned with our populace and caring for people here in Washington State. So I want to make sure that everybody remembers them very fondly. And we will have a chance to do a memorial for Ralph, who was a longtime member of our club. And that will be done on April 2nd. And so I want everyone to be around for that. I want to thank Logan Riley, who was on earlier and still here, who is going to be reporting on today's meeting. Mary, if you would welcome all guests that you know of.
Yes, we have Amy Hall, who is a new member. Welcome, Amy. I just wanted to shout her out real fast.
Thank
then
you.
we also have Jody Nyquist, which is a guest of Nicole Klein. Welcome. And I think that might be it for our guests today. So welcome, guests. We're glad to have you.
But we may have a few more that will join us on our Zoom, but we want to welcome everybody. And right now, I'm going to turn the meeting over to our president of the Seattle Rotary Service Foundation, Vicki Otsley. Go ahead, Vicki.
Thanks, President John. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce you all to Walter Hughes, who is recognized as a White House champion of change. Walter joined Rotary 25 years ago to spend more time with his dad. He's received the Rotary's Vocational Service Leadership Award and the Rotary Foundation's Citation for Meritorious Service. This year, Walter's team achieved their goal of impacting over 1 million lives. Projects included clean water, improved sanitation, education, better health, disease prevention, economic development, and empowering community leaders. He's a member of the Salem, Virginia Rotary Club, and I'm especially pleased to welcome Walter today as he's going to share with you how your Rotary donations can be leveraged through matching grants to have an even bigger impact on communities around the world. So welcome, Walter.
Thank you, Vicki. Okay, Mary, let's get that slide deck going. It's so good to be with you. And we're willing to talk about the grant 2341059. And the Rotarians from Obuasi, which is in central Ghana, are on the slide now. And Kwame Anor and Nana Menza and Abdul Mumin are three of our key.
I left the one on. I kind of looked at it last night and kind of liked it just in that one place.
I'm sorry. Okay. Go ahead, Mary, to the next slide. And what I want to talk about is Seattle gave $11,000. And that was matched by $11,000 from the district. And that turned into $30,775. And then that impact was turned into $220,000. So that's where giving $11,000 to the Rotary Foundation turns into almost $250,000 project. And that provided 60 new wells, 517 microflush toilets, and it impacted thousands of people having a toilet for their home. And 850 people were trained how to maintain wells. And women are targeted because women really care about clean water and education for their kids. And that is a key part of doing this work. Okay, Mary. And the microcredit loans are key. $154,000 of the budget of the 220,000 was microcredit loans. And those loans were providing new wells, new toilets, new farm loans, and small business loans. And so that provided 42 new wells, 460 composting toilets, and 58 loans for farms and businesses, and 6 small town water systems. And then the Rotary Foundation requires that that loan money be given out twice. So that turns into $308,000 of impact for just 2 rounds of loans for the grant. And we've been working with Steganor Microfinance for 7 years. Okay, Mary. And we aren't really doing charity any longer. We're doing microcredit loans. I mean, a 6-step empowerment model of really asking the leaders, what's your vision and what is your dream for your community? And we want your leadership, we want your labor, we want your training, we want local funding. So the first dollar doesn't come from Seattle, it comes from the community in Africa. And then if we can, we do village savings loans or microcredit loans, and then Rotary fills the funding gap. And so it becomes their project that we are a resource, but it's not some American or Canadian trying to save their community. They are the ones deciding what to get done and how to do it. Mary? And the loans, it's amazing having a toilet for your home for the first time. And having women be able to have a more product in their shops, and then weavers who are able to have a co-op so they can make kente cloth, which is one of the traditional cloths that are produced in Ghana. And a lot of times you'll see that cloth as representative of African cloth here in the US. Mary? And microflush toilet is a composting toilet. It was invented by a Rotarian, and it composted the human waste into compost in about 2 to 3 years. And it doesn't pollute the land or the water supply. And the cost is about $350 per household. So it's a huge change. And the user interface, as the inventor calls it, can be a seat or a squat fixture. And a lot of times the schools prefer the squat fixture over the seat because they think it's more sanitary. Okay. And I want to talk about some of the people. Ibrahim is a toilet maker. He was just a trainee that now has his own business. And he will live in the community while they're building the toilets for for those families. And grandmothers adopt him and feed him, and really he becomes part of the family. So it's life-changing for Ibrahim to be able to provide water and sanitation as a business from just being a laborer. Okay. And Joseph Boating is a weaver. And with the loan money, he's able to provide an education for his brother. And so he's able to farm and weave cloth. Mary? And then the drill rig operator, if you've ever been in a community, when the drill rig arrives, it's life-changing. And the crew that drills the well, they're part of a business. But the drill rig operator is in charge of making sure the drill rig doesn't get stuck meters down in the ground. And when the water flows out of the ground, he is coked in mud. But he is very proud because he is able to provide water for that community with his team. Mary? And so the long-term commitment with Seattle giving to the Rotary Foundation makes a huge difference. And our goal was 1 well. Okay. Our club was involved in playgrounds and literacy and doing things in the local community. And so we said, well, let's do one well in Africa. And we asked a club in San Francisco how they did it. And we were going to do one and done. And from that, it's turned into impacting 1 million people. So I want to thank Seattle for giving $11,000 that turned into a $250,000 to the Rotary Foundation. And it's made a huge difference for the people providing the help and also for the people receiving clean water and sanitation and new businesses and education. So thank you so very much, Vicki and Mary. It's life-changing. And we thank your club for making such a big difference.
Well, thank you very much, Walter. You live
Thanks,
in
John.
you live in a lovely part of Virginia, up in the Blue Ridge Mountain area, and I've spent time in D.C. and went up in the Shenandoah area and the Blue Ridge, and it's just a very pleasant place to be. So,
Well, thanks.
I'm glad you've joined us. And one of the other things that we should all remember is that our giving dollars to our Seattle Rotary Service Foundation, if you haven't done it, make sure you do, and also to TRF, both will work on projects like the one that Walter has been providing us with today. It's so valuable right now for us to be able to give in both ways, and it will come back in many ways to help us here in our Rotary requirements. So thank you again, Walter, for your presentation.
Thanks.
And now and please stick around because you'll really enjoy hearing from our main speaker today, David Domke, who I've known for a long time. David took Bobby and me and a group of people, mostly lawyers, on a wonderful trip to Montgomery, Alabama, to Birmingham, Alabama, and to Selma, along with a stop in Atlanta. It was just a fantastic historical trip, and one that we have been able to contribute a great deal to. But let me tell you a little bit about David. David grew up in Dearborn, Michigan, and worked as a journalist for several newspapers in the 1980s and early 1990s before earning his PhD in 1996 from the University of Minnesota. He served as a professor in the Department of Communication at the University of Washington until his retirement from there to do many other things in 2021. His research focused on communication, politics, and public opinion in the United States. In 2002, that's going back a ways, he received the University of Washington's Distinguished Teaching Award. In 2006, he was named the Washington State Professor of the Year by the Council for Advancement and Support of Education and the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. When he retired from the university, he joined and now is working for Common Power, where he supports the staff through raising money, teaching about voting rights, and providing political analysis and strategy. Just to let you know a quick little bit, of course, he'll tell you much more. Common Power works to foster, support, and amplify democracy that is just and inclusive, providing creative on-ramps to civic fieldwork through education, and fostering a community in which people learn from support and grow with one another. So with that, I'm going to turn the podium over to David and to enlighten all of us.
Thank you, John, so very much. It's great to be here with all of you. And as I look around the Zoom room, there's several of you that I've had the chance to get to know and to meet. And you've supported projects that I've been part of at the University of Washington and outside of the University of Washington over the years. So first, let me just say thanks. Okay, thank you very much. In our time, in this moment, in this country, it is imperative that we look at each other and we see each other and we understand that we're in this together. And I come today as a fierce advocate for democracy, a fierce advocate, and that's why I left the University of Washington, because being at a university is a very difficult time to be a fierce advocate for democracy. And I'm honored to do the work that I do at Common Power. Common Power, just a quickest nutshell, those two words are based upon our belief that the most common power that everybody should have in the United States in a democracy is the right to vote. And if that was spread out equally among everybody with equal access to it, we'd be in a much better place in this country, but we're not there. We happen, if you live in the state of Washington, to live in what is the second or third easiest place in this country to vote. All right. And so we work around the United States to help other people gain voter registration and then get out to vote. So I'm thrilled to do that work, honored to be invited today. And I want to talk about a constitutional crisis that is here, that is literally like unfolding in our life, in our moment, in an hour by hour basis right now in front of us. So much so that had I put together these slides a week ago, I would have had to completely redo them, 2/3 of them in the last 2 days. All right. So the reality is that this is a moment by moment situation. And you all as leaders and me and the work that I do, we have an opportunity here to make our voices heard and to stand up for democracy. So wherever you come down politically in terms of partisan identity and leanings, know that Common Power and the work we do is pan-partisan. We support anybody that believes in our democracy and in the right to vote in America and works that way in this country. The constitutional crisis that is here, here's where I want to go. All right. I want to start right here, 3 months into Trump 2.0. Trump 2.0 is a very different experience than Trump 1.0. It's different in terms of the way Trump came out of the gates. It's different in terms of how the American public has responded. Today, we're having a very slow kind of, but methodical and growing national response of anger towards a lot of Trump policies. Whereas in Trump 1.0, you had this very big set of protests right from the beginning. So things are unfolding in a different way, and I'm pleased to have it unfolding the way it is. I think people are making some decisions, and it looks clear to me that these are not just partisan choices that are being made right now. These are a variety of ideological leanings coming together and voicing some concerns about democracy. Here's a list of people or institutions targeted in the 3 months that have been Trump 2.0, and this is an incomplete list, so there's a decent chance you're going to think of something that I don't have on my list. Right out of the bat, right off the gate, immigrants, people who are either legally or illegal / undocumented in this country. All right. People who are transgender identities, again, a major point of targeting and policy passing and also pursuit within the identity in the U.S. military environments around them. Universities, more than 50 universities in the United States have been targeted and announced as targets by the Trump administration for policies that the Trump administration disagrees with around diversity, equity, inclusion, hiring practices, claims of anti-Semitism, all kinds of stuff. DEI has been targeted everywhere, not just at universities, in corporations, in public school, secondary level public schooling environments, in nonprofit organizations. The news media have been, constantly, forever a target of Trump et al. And the reality is that with the kind of attack on the press, and they're allowing the Associated Press gets thrown out of the White House press corps because they don't talk about, they use certain language that the White House doesn't want. They don't call the Gulf of Mexico Gulf of America, and so they're thrown out. So that just the targeting list keeps going and going. The U.S. military, the overhauling of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the removal of people in positions of leadership. The issues right now with Signal, with the Signal Gate, just so many things that have been targeted by the Trump administration. The federal government, from USAID to the Department of Education, and on and on and on. to law firms, to a Perkins Coie here in Seattle and Washington, D.C., to Paul Weiss. And just this morning, the Trump administration announced another executive order targeting a different law firm, the one that I'm not familiar with, but another major national law firm. So here's the methods that they've used. The methods have been executive actions. These are not executive orders, I mean here. These are executive actions. There are things that the president and the executive branch can do about these different areas. They have the authority to do some things. And so on executive actions, if you win the presidency, you got the ability to do these things. All right. Then there's executive orders, which are kind of these pseudo-legal spaces that have power but aren't the same as a law enacted by the legislative branch. And so he's issued so many executive orders, we know. And then there's DOGE and Elon Musk, the Department of Government Efficiency. And there is no cabinet position for DOGE. This has been completely outside of the federal government oversight process, and yet enormous influence of firing, of laying off, of eliminating different pieces of the government. So these targeting, this approach, these methods, has run into one major wall or blockage, and that's federal judges. And I mean specifically federal judges. Federal judges have over and over again said, wait, hold on, wait, just wait a minute here. That you can pass these, you can sign these executive orders, and you can do DOGE, you can do the things you want. But the reality is that this has to uphold constitutional scrutiny. And so federal judges have said, wait, hold on. And this has begun to thoroughly anger and outrage Trump land, Trump world. And whenever you want to know when there's a new kind of, we'll call it shock and awe initiative or campaign from MAGA universe, from Trump's kind of approach to the world, you pay attention to what a certain number of key voices in the conservative ecosphere, what they begin to say. And they begin to say things that are very similar to each other. And so here's what just came out on today's Wednesday. On Monday, so actually, this is where we're at right now. We're right here with the federal judges say, wait, hold on. This is Clay Travis. Clay Travis is a conservative political figure who also writes a lot about sports. And he says this is on Twitter, Trump 2.0 has more federal court injunctions in 60 days than Obama did in 8 years, or Biden did in 4 years. Insanity. So there's a count of federal injunctions across those presidencies. And then exactly the same photograph from Charlie Kirk, who heads up Turning Point USA, a staunch conservative, young next generation kind of leadership area, saying the same thing with similar language, black robe tyranny. Now, why it is that Trump had 64 federal injunctions against his policies in his first term, or he's got 15 already in 3 months, is completely sidestepped by this messaging. The messaging says that, in fact, the only problem here is not what Trump is doing. The problem is the federal judiciary. And so we know that this is coming, that this attack on the judiciary is coming, all right? It's coming in a big way. And so this is what a U.S. constitutional crisis looks like. This is what it looks like. And I know that you all are really smart. You all are not my freshman students that I had at the University of Washington. And I also know that I have to figure things out myself when I'm trying to understand what's going on in the world. And so when I do talks like this, I generally just kind of walk through my own process of trying to figure things out. So this may be things that you already know. It may be things that you know already, but it's important to kind of like think about them again. For me, it helps me to understand what a constitutional crisis looks like. There are 3 branches of the federal government: legislative, Congress, the executive, the presidency, and the supporters that he gets to appoint in the presidency, political appointees, and then the judiciary, which is the courts. These 3 branches, when they work together, it's actually a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And there have been moments in our country, many in fact, where they have worked together and they have upheld each other or challenged and checked and balanced each other, but in a very effective way. And I'm kind of like Winston Churchill in one respect, in that I believe that democracy is the worst form of government except for all of the others. Okay. And so the fact is that when these things work together, the American experiment is and can be a beautiful thing. What ties them all together is this thing called the U.S. Constitution, a written document written in 1787, eventually adopted with the Bill of Rights in 1789, and finally formally ratified in 1791. The U.S. Constitution of the United States holds these all together. And so as long as the things are working together, we don't have a constitutional crisis. But when these three branches in any form at all begin to argue and disagree and really go after one or the other, then we get into what's a constitutional crisis. Who has preeminence? Who decides? In George W. Bush's famous words, who are the deciders? Okay, who's the deciders? And right now we have a toe-to-toe battle going on between the executive branch and the federal judiciary. And I put these arrows in red because they're both controlled by Republicans, all right now. So this is a battle among people who have power and have been elected either as Republicans or are judges who lead in ways that have tended to align with conservative principles. There's a big conflict between these two, and this is where the constitutional crisis largely sits right now. The executive branch trump it all, the cabinet arguing with the judiciary about these executive orders and other actions that have been put on hold or completely reversed by judges. But we're not just quite here yet. The legislative body is also getting involved in this. And so on Monday, Jim Jordan, who heads up the House Judiciary Committee, House Representative Judiciary Committee, said he's going to hold hearings about activist judges, including Jeb Boasberg, who's the one who is most in the crosshairs right now because of a ruling that he's put in place. And so Jeb Boasberg is going to be a point of focus. And so Jordan and the Republican Congress, House, are going to have hearings. And yesterday, Mike Johnson, who's the Speaker of the House, a Republican, said this: we do have authority over the federal courts. That is a constitutional crisis statement right there. We do have authority over the federal courts. As you know, we can eliminate an entire district court. Okay, all right. This is the kind of Andrew Jackson versus John Calhoun stuff, okay, updated to today, with, of course, the entire country and the Constitution on the line. All right. So that's where we are. I wanted, in my second half, there's two acts to my talk today. In the second act here, I want to talk about the essential plot items that inform how we got to this point. Okay. Part one is Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution, adopted in 1787. In Article 3, Section 1, it says the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in inferior courts, as in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. See, that's where Johnson's making his claim, as to courts Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. That's where he's making his claim. The judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior and shall at stated times receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. All right, this is what's known as Article 3 judges. Every federal judge is appointed in this country, nominated by the president, approved by the Senate, is what's called a federal judge, an Article 3 judge, and they have lifetime appointments. I could not more strongly disagree with lifetime appointments for judges. I strongly disagree with this, and I understand I might be in a bunch of lawyers saying this, all right? But the reality is that that is the law. That is the case for federal judges in this country. They're nominated by the president, approved by the Senate. They're appointed for life, essentially, not necessarily, but essentially. The one way in which a few in American history have been impeached and removed is arguments have made that they weren't exhibiting good behavior, and so they were removed. The argument today by the executive branch is that blocking these actions by the executive branch is a form of treasonous anti-American behavior. So that this is the argument for how they can be removed. There are 890 total Article 3 judges in this country. They're not all filled right now. 833 right now are filled, but there's 890 total. 9 of them are on the Supreme Court. Okay. Here's the composition of all of the Article 3 judges in this country today, right now. This is from the Pew Research Center. These are who appointed these judges. If you look on the far right, you see the share of all active Article 3 judges. Joe Biden appointed 27%. Trump appointed 27% in his first term. Obama still got 27% of them appointed. And then the rest of them are among others, including Bush at 13. When you break this down, it's about 55 Democratic or 56 Democratic appointed, 46, 44 Republican right now, but Trump is in office. He's gonna have a chance to fill a lot more. So we're gonna be back to about even pretty soon here. So when you look at the composition of the federal judges, they've been appointed by Republicans and Democrats almost evenly in this country right now. And Jeb Boasberg, the target right now of Donald Trump in the executive branch, Boasberg was appointed by George W. Bush, all right? Here's part 2 of the essential plot items. I got 3 essential plot items. Part 1 is the notion of the Article 3 judges. Part 2 is the principle of judicial review. Judicial review is the position that the judges, those Article 3 federal judges, have ultimate interpretive power over what the Constitution says. It's the viewpoint that judges in the judiciary, federal judges, have the ultimate decision-making power over what the Constitution says. And this idea of judicial review was firmed in 1803 in a landmark Supreme Court case of Marbury v. Madison. And in that case, the Supreme Court of the United States said that, hey, there's a U.S. Constitution. And within that U.S. Constitution, within it are laws. Those laws are created by Congress. And then within that are state constitutions, and within the state constitutions are state laws. Okay. The question is, where do executive orders fall in all of this? So judicial review is the position that the judiciary oversees how you decide where a law, or whether a law or not is legal under the U.S. Constitution, and whether state laws are as well. Where do executive orders fall? It's not exactly clear. And so that's what the argument is right now of the executive branches. Hey, executive orders, they fall in here too. And where should we be? And the argument is, are they somehow supra outside of all this? Or is it somewhere between federal laws and the US Constitution? And how much deference should judges have? It's a morass right now. Okay. The executive
David,
branch essentially right now.
Heads up, we have about three minutes before questions.
Okay.
We
so
have about 3 to 4
last...
minutes before questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So we're right here at part 3. If you go back to this judicial review, the claim of the executive branch is that these executive orders somehow supersede all of this or get special deference by the judges. Judges are saying, nah, I don't know about that. I don't think so. Here's the inflection point at which this country really moved a certain way. It was 1982, and I'm going to quote from a Politico article that was in 2018 about that moment in 1982. Spring of 1982. America was mired in a recession. Still new President Ronald Reagan was defending to a skeptical public his economic policies, while Congress fretted about the chances of a nuclear war with the Soviet Union. Despite this uncertainty, a few conservative students at elite law schools sensed not anxiety, but a moment of opportunity. Inspired by Reagan's ideology and emboldened by his election, they did something ambitious, indeed audacious. They asked a collection of the country's most notable right-leaning scholars, judges, and Department of Justice officials to assemble at one of the very hubs of liberal orthodoxy, Yale University. Some 200 came this last weekend in April. It had a dry title, A Symposium on Federalism, Legal and Political Ramifications. And it easily could have been just another set of lectures of interest only to a small lot of participants and attendees, the kind of higher ed corkboard flyer get-togethers that happen all the time with no broader fanfare or larger lasting consequences. But at this one, as speakers castigated what they viewed as coastal elites and a leftist media and legal establishment and argued for a more originalist reading of the Constitution, people present felt a new sort of buzz. In the hallways, between the sessions, the vibe was more than just brainy. It was practically giddy. Last part here. Ted Olson, then an assistant attorney general in the DOJ's Office of Legal Counsel, and later on, the lead lawyer for George W. Bush in the election deciding Bush v. Gore of 2000, declared in his talk that weekend, I sense that we are at one of those points in history where the pendulum may be beginning to swing in another direction. He would prove to be prescient. The pendulum indeed swung that weekend. The symposium burst the Federalist Society. Federalist Society, over the course of the last 43 years, has had these objectives: checking federal power, protecting individual liberty, and interpreting the Constitution according to its original meaning. And that brings us to right where we are right now. On the United States Supreme Court, you look at the judges that have been Federalist Society judges, either were historically in this Federalist Society or still speak to them regularly. And these are those judges. We have 6 Federalist Society judges that make up the conservative majority on the court. What do they do in this moment? That's where we are. What do they do? It's not as simple. They're just going to do exactly what the executive branch would want them to do. John Roberts has already said, hey, don't go impeaching judges. Don't go doing that. Brett Kavanaugh, turns out he was a college roommate of Jeb Boasberg, the guy that's under attack right now. This is going to, Amy Coney Barrett, we're not sure where she's going to come down. Now, I wouldn't want to put my lives, I would prefer not to be here. I wish everything that we were not here, but we are, and I'm not giving up hope yet. So there you go.
Well, thank you very
Thank
much.
you, yeah.
Jaime is going to give you some of the questions, but before we open it up for questions, I have one that I want to talk to you about, and that has to do with the most recent thing, since Common Power is so interested in voting rights. The executive has just stated that he wants to change how we register voters on a federal level. Can you comment a little bit about that and where we stand in our voting rights?
Sure. That was just yesterday. He issued this executive order saying that we need to change the way that voter registration is done. The executive order has like 4 or 5 different pieces to it. And one of them that would strike right home in Washington is that it says they're going to withhold federal funds for elections for any state that counts ballots that are received after election night. And so they want to change that. And that might wipe out all of you. Okay, in terms of when you mail your ballots. Under our current constitutional setting and the rulings of the Supreme Court and the United States wording of the Constitution about who controls election laws, this executive order should go nowhere. It should go absolutely nowhere. And it's the bane of my existence, actually. It has been, in one hand, that the federal government can't just simply change voting laws, because I'd really like them to do that in the good way, make it more expansive. Let's have 3 weeks of early voting in every state. Let's have same-day voter registration in every state. Okay, let's do that. But we can't wave a magic wand and have a president, even with control of Congress, do that easily. So there's no way that under constitutional language in the U.S. Constitution and standing Supreme Court precedent, that these things that Donald Trump said yesterday, that there's no way they should be enacted, not one bit. Now, if they get enacted, it's gonna be because the entire Constitution has been assaulted and we've lost because it's just one of a package of things that they're trying to do, obviously. But at this moment in time, until we cross that Rubicon and the Supreme Court rules that, in fact, temporary restraining injunctions by federal judges can be ignored by the Trump administration, until we cross that, then I think we're still okay. But that ruling's coming. We're going to just hear that very soon, probably within the next 2 weeks. I don't know what the Supreme Court will say.
Go ahead, Jaime. Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you. Our next question comes from Dorothy Bullitt. What do you advise that concerned citizens do to help save our democracy, protect our national security?
I'm sorry, Jaime, could you repeat that, please?
What do you advise that concerned citizens do to help save our democracy, protect our national security?
Sure. I don't have a specific piece that would distinguish between democracy and national security. So I don't know if, Dorothy, if you meant it as two separate domains. I can only speak to like one general domain there. Like, what should we do? What should be the action for anybody who's concerned about the trajectory of the United States' governmental leadership? There's three things that we're suggesting at Common Power in our body of work, and it is all available to anybody. The first is that if you disagree with where the government is going, or where Elon Musk and Tesla are trying to take, Elon Musk is trying to take this country, then you absolutely must show up in the public space. It's really great that you might feel a certain way. It's really great that if you write a check, we need those. We absolutely need those. But the reality is that public opinion that is visible is what matters in a democracy. And so if we don't show up in the public and wave our signs and march, all with important, nonviolent, peaceful approaches, if we don't do that, then the reality is that nobody else gets pressured to do anything. So that is item one. In scientific terms, showing up at public protests and making your voice heard is not a sufficient condition to bring about change, but it is a necessary one. It is a necessary thing. So you may think it's a worthless time. I have no idea what you all might think, but it is not. It is the raw material upon which social change happens. Second, we need to compete in every election for people that are saying that they're going to fight for democracy. Every election in particular, that is a U.S. House election, because this is the place where we could have our quickest check and balance in the legislative branch right now, with a close composition of the Democrats and Republicans. So we are inviting everybody to participate in working in every U.S. House election for those candidates that will stand up to this authoritarianism. So this weekend, for example, we're working in two U.S. House races in Florida. We will be in Texas. We will be in Arizona. We will be in New York in coming weeks, because every election matters. And even if those elections are mostly foregone partisan conclusions, like the Republicans are going to win here in Florida and the Democrats are going to win here in Houston, the reality is that if you care about democracy and you don't show up, just like if you don't show up in the public, then you are forfeiting your moral authority. If we don't show up and compete for the most important elections, for the thing that we think is the defining element of democracy, then who the hell is going to show up? All right. So for number two, it's show up in elections. And we do that with our people at Common Power. And we also receive support from folks like yourselves who sponsor people. We have a whole bench of next generation leaders to go. All right. I'm not here to make a pitch. I don't even know if that's doable at a Rotary, but hey, you can find us, commonpower.org, donate. We would take your support. Okay. And we would fund it to next generation leaders to do this work. And the number three thing is you have to reach out to elected officials and make your voice heard by them. You have to call them. You have to text them. You have to postcard them. You have to letter write them. You have to show up at their offices. All right. Now, in Washington State, in Seattle, you might say, oh, Pramila Jayapal is already here and Patty Murray's already there. I would go so far as to say that they need to feel the pressure too. All right. They need to feel that pressure too. And not just them. We have a list of 15 representatives in the House that we are recommending to people that they contact and call. And you can get through to them and leave them messages. And they don't just throw you out just because you're not in the district. Sometimes they screen you, but a lot of times they don't. So those are our 3 actions. Show up in the public spaces, work in elections, and pressure elected officials. All 3 of those are the essentials for us. None of that guarantees anything, but it gives us the possibility. Quickly on elections, we are also very active in the Wisconsin Supreme Court election, which is this coming Tuesday. And it's not a national election, but it is a Elon Musk invested in election. And we want to stop Musk right there.
Thank you for that. Our next question is from Jen Levy. There has been calls to boycott certain businesses, i.e. Target, for pulling back their DEI efforts in response to Trump. Do boycotts help?
100% yes. You heard the Montgomery bus boycott? It's the most important boycott in perhaps the history of this country's fight for racial justice and democracy. When the only action you have is to withdraw your financial support in a capitalistic society, that matters enormously. It does. The problem with showing up in the public or boycotts is in our attention and our short attention span world, it doesn't feel like it brings change quickly enough. And it doesn't. It doesn't. But it's an essential piece of the puzzle. So Target's, the impact has been on Target, the showing up of Tesla dealerships and the protesting of them. This matters because it gets the attention of other corporate leaders. So I 100% support this. It's one of the ways that we can make a difference. The worst thing we can do is to feel a certain way and do nothing, because then we feel helpless.
And this will be our last question here. I kind of like it a lot. It's going to be, it's not a 2-parter, but it's a little lengthy. This is from Sten Chrissy. A plurality of voters experienced Trump's first administration and determined they wanted a repeat. How do we address the concerns of these voters in such a way that Mr. Trump's appeal fades? And here's the part I'm really interested in. Are you concerned that we replace traditional congressional, judicial, executive checks and balances for 2-party checks and balances? That last question is what really gets me going. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, the reality on the first part of it is that Trump did win a national popular vote. He did. And that is important. This country voted in a majority to elect this guy. They did. And so that has to be taken into account and treated with a certain level of respect and process here. It absolutely does. And so I'm totally on board for that. Common power is about common. It's about all of us. It's not about throwing anybody out for anything at any point. We need us all. On the second part, I am not advocating for that. No, I'm not. I'm not advocating for a partisan checks and balances on each other. I would prefer a multi-party system. All right. I would prefer a multi-party environment where coalitions had to be built in order to get things done, as opposed to really a zero-sum arena right now where one party has power in the executive branch, one party has power in either one of the Senate or the House, and one party has power in the judiciary branch, essentially, because of the appointments they've been able to make, at least at the Supreme Court level. I'm advocating for a continuation of an environment in which checks and balances occur. And if it was up to me, I'd put term limits on federal judges. All right. I'd put term limits. 18 years sounds fine to me. All right. The reality of that 9 unelected justices deciding upon the autonomy of women over their bodies, that just doesn't sit well with me. All right.
Well, great stuff, David. Thank you. There's a lot more questions in the chat group from the meeting of the meeting. If you want to go in there and go crazy with answering, that's on you. I think they will appreciate the response back and forth. Again, that's extra work on your part, but we're going to have to move on forward. And President John, please take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Jaime. Thank you so much, David. We really appreciate you being here. And in honor of your speaking, we are donating 600 healthy meals to Harvest Against Hunger. We know that you're thrilled with that, and thank you so much for being here and taking time out from your day to enlighten us here at Seattle Rotary. I also want to thank REB Enterprises, Carl Benke, and Bloodworks Northwest for their sponsorship support, and let all of you guys out there know that we are always looking for good sponsors. And so if you have any connections with corporations or other organizations that might want to help sponsor our speakers and what we do in Rotary, please have them get in touch with Mary or me or anybody on our board. At this particular point, I'm going to welcome Jan Levy, who is our incoming president and will take over from me on July 1st. Jan, do you want to tell us a little bit about Leadership Tomorrow?
Thank you, John, President John, sorry. I am here, basically, most of you know that I was the executive director of Leadership Tomorrow for over 29 years, almost 30 years. I'm also a graduate of the program. And I'm here really on behalf of Bindia Patel, our newest Leadership Tomorrow director and a member of this club, to just remind everyone that Leadership Tomorrow is currently accepting applications for its next cohort. Applications are due on April 7th. For those of you who've never heard of this program, it is a premier civic leadership program where you will get to build your leadership skills. You will gain a cross-sector network that's public, private, and nonprofit network of over 2,700 alumni. You will gain a much deeper understanding of our regional challenges and opportunities and get a better sense of where and how you fit in and where you want to give back. So if you know anyone, including yourselves, who would like to apply to the program, you can go on the website. As I said, applications are due April 7th. We have a number of graduates of Leadership Tomorrow in this program, and it's terrific. So get your applications in. And if you have questions, you can call me or any of the other Leadership Tomorrow graduates who are in our club. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jan. Leadership Tomorrow is absolutely wonderful. It's sponsorship through the Greater Seattle Chamber and has provided us with an incredible number of leaders in our community, and we sure need that as we move forward. And so thank you, Jan. Thank you for what you did for Leadership Tomorrow, and we know that it's going to continue for a long time. Jaime, you're up again, telling us a little bit about all the things coming up in Seattle Rotary.
Thank you, President John. Thank you for everyone who's been here today. Appreciate it greatly. And I'm going to have to coincide that Rotary's Day with this weather has been great, even though these thunderstorms were coming later. So we're going to start off with Wednesday, April 2nd, lunch meeting at the Plymouth Church featuring new art museum director and CEO, Socialize at noon. It's going to be awesome. We're going to be pleased to welcome Stott Stullen to our next in-person lunch meeting. He begins his tenure at Seattle Art Museum with a groundbreaking Ai Weiwei retrospective. I don't know what that is. We'll find out. We will also welcome the return of John Seckler's Member Spotlight. You know how he makes us laugh and feels good. It's great. These stories are awesome. Please get your tickets today. Following week, Wednesday, April 9th evening, member event at the Wisteria Hall, Graham Visitor Center at 6 p.m. Man, I don't know where you get these places, Stephen, but you're on fire. Next Wednesday evening, we'll welcome and convey the director at the UW Botanical Gardens, Christina Owens. Owens will update club members on projects and programs at the gardens. Food and refreshments will be provided. Please register on our Mayberry to attend. The following week, we have our luncheon meeting in person on April 16th at the Plymouth Church, featuring Jeff Robinson of the Who We Are Project. We originally slated Jeff to speak earlier this year, so we're pleased that we're able to find a new date for him. As always, please register for this meeting in advance. It really does help us out with accountability as well as getting our budget balanced and a few other things. So greatly appreciate it. Then a couple days later, on Saturday, April 19th, is our Rotary Boys and Girls Club Cleanup Day. That very same Rotary Boys and Girls Club that produced a #1 overall NBA draft pick. Yes, that club. And many more other amazing students and who are just doing great things in life and could just use some support. We will have more event details soon, but please save the date for now. We are asking members to plan to attend, sign up in advance so that the Rotary Boys and Girls Club knows how many volunteers to expect. More to follow. And then on Wednesday, April 23rd, to end our April, we're at another Zoom in lunch meeting. We're getting better at this. We're flowing through these things. It's really nice. We have the PBS Chief Operating Officer, Jonathan Barzile. I love Mary. She puts like, how do you say these names correctly? Appreciate it. 12:30 to 1:30. Thanks to Club President John Bridge and your amazing connections, our club member Rob Dunlop will be helping to arrange this extra special nationally known speaker for our Zoom only meeting. Save the date to ensure that you attend so we can be part of this very special virtual meeting. Thank you for the time. Appreciate it. And back to you, President John.
Oh, well, thank you, Jaime. Let's all participate in this. And I know that there are a number of our members that aren't on our Zoom today, and trust that they will also be part of our future programs. Want to also mention that, as I told you at the beginning, we're going to have a little poll that Mary is putting together, and this will show up on all your Zooms, I guess. It's coming right now, and you guys can fill that out, and we'll have instantaneous results. So we'll see as you can look at this thing, it's sort of filling out. Somebody really likes expensive lunches here, I'm noticing. Anyway, be sure and at least punch up where you think we should be spending money for lunch. Now I get to tell you a little bit about occurrences on March 26th. Again, mentioning it's Women's History Month, which I should have mentioned a long time ago, as I said. In 1804, Congress ordered the removal of Indians east of the Mississippi to the Louisiana Purchase area. In 1910, the U.S. forbid immigration to criminals, anarchists, paupers, and the sick. In 1917, remember this, the Seattle Metropolitans won the Stanley Cup over the Montreal Canadiens. Let's hope that the Kraken can finally get to that point of winning the Stanley Cup. I mean, we've done it before. They can do it again. In 1945, the Allies, led by the U.S. Marine Corps, secured the island of Iwo Jima from the Imperial Japanese Army. In 1953, Dr. Jonas Salk announced he had successfully tested a vaccine to prevent polio. And in 1979, the Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and Egyptian President Anwar Sadat signed the Egyptian-Israel Peace Treaty in Washington, D.C. And more importantly, to our area, in the year 2000, 25 years ago, the kingdom imploded. So, and birthdays. Robert Frost in 1874, Sandra Day O'Connor in 1930, Leonard Nimoy in 1931, Nancy Pelosi in 1940, and Diana Ross in 1944. And I happen to be wearing the right color today because in Canada and the United States, today is Purple Day, whatever that is. Now take a look at the at our poll, and the 60 plus went down in percentage. It looks like right now the winners are somewhere around the 40 to 49, but it's all over the board, guys. I'll leave this to Jan to look at, and our implementation team, because I don't have to worry about this. It's for the future. Anyway, given that, I've got my gavel and bell. We are adjourned.
I'll keep this open a few more seconds, and this poll will also probably be in the newsletter this week as well. So thank you all.
Good for you, Mary. Thanks for doing the poll.
Oh yeah, thank you. Agreed, Kathy. That's an ongoing debate, so more on that soon.
I understand, and I just feel we want to have more people